Shalom from Jerusalem. This is the update, Israel at war, on day 471 of the war, which began on October the 7th, 2023. And this is TV7 Israel News out of Jerusalem. I'm Amir Oren, sitting in for the traveling Jonathan Hessen. And we have with us today 3 stars. Stars, just as the term refers to, but also 3 one-stars, 3 brigadier generals, either in the reserve or retired. They will each choose whatever fits them. We have Mark Kimmett out of Washington, Brigadier General, U.S. Army, Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, a veteran of the Central Command, among many other positions. General Kimmett, welcome.
Thank you, Auden. Good to see you today.
Thank you. This is out of Washington, D.C., or the vicinity. And in central Israel, Relik Shafir, Brigadier General in the Israeli Air Force, a veteran fighter pilot, flew all the way to Baghdad and back, thankfully, and commanded Israel's biggest and most important Air Force base, at least at the time, Tel Nov. Relik Shafir, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And again, another Brigadier General, Doron Gavish, of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense Command, right now commanding the task force having to do with air and missile defense, earlier the commanding general of all of these units. Doron Gavish, welcome.
Shalom, Amir.
So the 2-year war has ended, or at least for the time being. It may resume, but it will not be the same. And up to now, if one looks at the declared war aims of the Israeli cabinet, only one was fully and immediately achieved, and that is the return of the 20 remaining living hostages. This was already achieved 2 or 3 days ago, right after or concurrently with the visit by President Donald Trump. However, the other points in his 20-point plan are yet to be achieved. Yes, there is a ceasefire, mostly kept by both sides, except for minor incidents. But the bodies of the 28 Israelis kept by Hamas have only been partially retrieved. Only 9 Israelis and a Palestinian who worked for the Israeli military and is not counted in the 28, have been returned. And obviously, outstanding, there are 19 other bodies. Hamas is still in control of at least a great part of the Gaza Strip. It is shooting people in the streets. It is doing whatever it wants. And therefore, the declared war aim of toppling Hamas militarily and governmentally is yet to be achieved. Relik Shafir, how do you consider it a win, a draw, a loss for Israel?
We'll have to dissect this question. The fact that we did not reach the 5 final points put out by the government, as far as I'm concerned, is almost immaterial. Reason being that wars should be analyzed post-mortem rather than where the goals achieved exactly the way they were formatted at the beginning. The Palestinian question that loomed over this war and was actually the reason for Hamas for attacking Israel in the first place is back on the table as a major obstacle to reaching a larger um, strategic target of having peace or at least a pact with the Sunni moderate countries around us. And this will not be achieved until we have solved the Palestinian question to some kind of pacifying the area. That was not achieved as yet. And I think this is the major point that we need to address. The other points are the what we call the axis of evil: Iran, the Lebanese Hezbollah, maybe the Houthis, and other members of those of that axis have been defeated more or less. And there's a strategic change, certainly in Lebanon and Syria. And I think the Iranians are in a very dire position. So, as far as that is concerned, this is certainly a win for Israel, though not intended maybe at the beginning. It is a consequence of the war, and that certainly can be seen as a victory. But that being said, only if it is followed by a diplomatic or statesmanship that calms the area down, and they remain in that position. It's not just a momentary lull. So this also remains to be seen. And a lot of the cards are held by the fact that will Israel go along with President Trump's vision for the Middle East and be able to make the political changes that will actually complete the military moves in all those areas. So that remains to be seen, and a lot of it is in Israel's hand. But on the political front, worldwide, Israel has lost a lot of support in the Western world, including with some of the Republicans and certainly the Democrats in the States. And as far as that is concerned, it is more or less in Trump's hand and cannot really, doesn't have the leverage that we had before. So I wouldn't really count the blessings at this stage, but only say that the potential for a victory is there, but it has to be realized through the government's decision and which way to go with the Palestinians and with the Western world's value system, I would say.
And the war came with a great human cost for Israel. Some 2,000 soldiers, other uniformed personnel, and civilians. So General Kimmett, as General Shafir mentioned, a lot rests on President Trump's shoulders. He has taken a victory lap already. It seems as if he's now focused on other issues, other arenas, be they Venezuela or domestic American politics, law enforcement, what have you. Can his attention span encompass Gaza now during the mundane stages of the aftermath of the war?
Well, I think the answer is yes, but it's conditional upon whether his people, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and his other negotiators stay focused on the problem. Look, the president's had a busy week, as you say. What happened in Israel over the weekend, and then he had the Charlie Kirk Memorial. He had the leader of Argentina in the country, and tomorrow he's going to meet with Zelensky. The president of the United States always has a lot on his plate, and you could make that same allegation against any other president of the United States. Will they stay focused on a particular problem? Look, Zelensky, we haven't talked about him in a long, long time here in America. We seem to forget there's a war going on over there. And yet, there's going to be discussions tomorrow about using tomahawks against Russia, provided to Ukraine. So I'm pretty confident that number one, if the negotiators like Witkoff and Kushner stay focused, I think the president will have the ability to handle all of his responsibilities around the world without anything uh, being lost in terms of what happened and the progress being made in Israel.
Well, Witkoff is also negotiating on Trump's behalf vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia, too. He also has a double portfolio. Even though your former colleague, retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, is ostensibly the emissary for this issue, he has been shunted aside by Witkoff, hasn't he?
Well, precisely, he is the representative for Ukraine. He is not the representative. He's the special envoy for Ukraine and Ukraine only. Early on, when Keith was being considered for that role, there was it was envisioned that he would be the lead for all of this, but the Russians rejected it. And if you have somebody that the Russians reject showing up at the table, it's not going to do you any good. So his authority was limited and continues to be limited to as special envoy for Ukraine without any discussion or relations with regards to the Russia portfolio.
Thank you, General Kimmett. General Gavish, you are one of the most experienced and up-to-date officers in the field of liaison with foreign militaries, especially, but not limited to CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command. How is this liaison mission going to be undertaken by the IDF?
In general, we have to say that, CENTCOM is very, very regular to it. This is what they do on a daily basis within the region here. They have different bases in different countries. They are working together with other forces, some of them European forces, some of their regional forces. So for CENTCOM, I don't think that this is something unique to do something like this, which cooperates a lot of different armies and air forces and whatever they would need for this mission. Of course, there is the uniqueness of this mission, and I remember that General Kimmett referred to it in our last update, saying that there is a difference between when you're coming as a peace force, then if you're coming as a force which is there to enforce the agreement. But anyhow, I think that what we would see here in Israel, it would be probably only the headquarters that would be taking care of this mission led by CENTCOM.
Well, two notes. One, maybe the headquarters or the command cell should be on a vessel offshore, one of these helicopter carriers, which serves as a floating command post for either the Sixth Fleet or another one off the Mediterranean shore of either Israel or Gaza. Just a suggestion. And another note, Israel used to insist that only nations who have diplomatic relations with it contribute their contingents to such a force. Do you think that this time around too, because Indonesia, for instance, does not have such a formal relationship with Israel?
Yeah, but we have to remember here that although we're talking about being in Israel, but this effort would be led by the United States and by CENTCOM. They're going to be the commanders of this mission. So with regard to that, it would be a CENTCOM effort. Of course, Israel is part of it. Israel would support it, but this is the CENTCOM effort, and it's a bit different from, let's say, of what we've done in the history.
Now, an identical question for all three of you, but not together, please, each by turn. If the war is really over, this has been a unique kind of war for Israel for 2 years. How does the IDF now escape the destiny of all militaries learning to fight the last war once again, while the challenge awaiting it might be different altogether? General Shafir.
Well, obviously, this war has to be looked at in a totally different manner than previous wars. There are no tanks, no airplanes, no anti-aircraft missiles shot. I think one was shot from Iran. The Syrian military did not fight at all. Even Hezbollah were limited to firing rockets with almost no ground war in Lebanon. So it wasn't really the kind of war that armies prepare themselves for. And so the let's say urban warfare. Urban warfare was actually the main point of the army in this war. But there will be no other urban warfare except in Gaza because on the other potential fronts, there are no cities, there's no intermingling of military and civilian. So we should put this war aside and think of larger wars against airplanes, tanks, and I would say even Western type of anti-aircraft missiles, electronic warfare, and other types of weapons that will be in play. So taking the lessons learned from this war does not lead us into the next war, and it's a dangerous tone because if we, for instance, supply ourselves with a lot of equipment against an assault such as Hamas did in October 23, we would be making a grave mistake because this was an infiltration of a small group of several thousand warriors with RPGs at most. This is not a war. This is a guerrilla type of interaction. So this is just an example of the lessons that we may learn, but not build the military to confront these kinds, but rather a larger war with adversaries that have similar weapons as the ones we have.
General Gavish, you are taking part, presumably, in after-action reviews, debriefings, lessons learned. Can the top brass of the Israeli military do both, concentrating on the present, on the task at hand, and thinking about the future?
Well, of course, Amir, we cannot talk here about what are the exact lessons learned, but we could say that in general, this is exactly what is being done. We have to remember that, for sure, being part of the Israeli Air Force, part of your DNA is continuously debriefing each one of the missions, each phase of the war. And of course, now when we're looking back 2 years to the past 2 years. I would say in general that we have to be very careful in thinking of or being sure on where we are at this point. We are into the agreement. We are just at the beginning of it. I think that although we are in kind of a ceasefire, I'm not sure that everything we could say that is being done until we get to this point that we achieved our goals. And we have to remember that we could say, by the way, that we achieved the first one, which is bringing back the hostages, although not all of them yet, because there are still those that needs to be back to Israel for internal arrests. But the vast majority of those hostages are back in Israel. But the other two, which is demilitarize the Hamas and making sure that the Hamas is not the ruler of the Gaza Strip, we didn't achieve that yet. So I don't think that we should look on where we are now at as something that the war is done. We are still have to be prepared to whatever will happen if the Hamas would, do things which are different from what was agreed upon. We know the Hamas, we know the nature, we see it in the last days. So therefore, I would be very cautious in finalizing everything. But in general, you're right. This is what IDF, IAF, everyone is doing, looking back on the last 2 years and asking itself, how could we be better for the next campaign, and not only looking at Gaza, because we have to remember that we had and still have 7 different fronts, and we have to talk and debrief each one of them.
So finally, a more detached, I won't say semi-detached, this is a different connotation at all, but a more detached observer, General Kimmit, you are not as emotionally involved as your two colleagues here are. They are not only professional military officers, they are Israeli, and you have the experience and the remoteness which come with your position. How do you view the war which Israel fought? Are there any lessons which the US military can draw from it?
Well, we always draw from other experiences, but I want to go back to your original question, which is the notion of making sure we win this war next time, or we in fact win the next war, which will be completely different. As a young officer, there's this great book that we were forced to read called America's First Battles. It's a very, very good book because what it demonstrates is that we lost every first battle of every war that we ever fought. The book was published in the early 80s. It really was a seminal book. We haven't lost the first battle since then. And it comes down to two fundamental issues. General Kavish is right. You need to sit down and do the after-action reviews. What you did right, what you did wrong, how are you going to change the behavior so you don't get it wrong the second time? But that's for this war and understanding where we came up short. But then there's that other group of people that need to be sitting in the ivory tower trying to figure out what the next war is going to look like. I've seen this happen in my own army. We went from Vietnam, which was counterinsurgency, to back to the Cold War on along the Iron Curtain for years and years, and that was a completely different transformation that we had to take with our army. A little bit of self-promotion. You can read a little bit about this in an article I wrote for the Wall Street Journal. So we went from counterinsurgency back to high-intensity warfare. We then did the first Gulf War, where we actually won that first battle. But then we took that army that had fought in the first Gulf War, then stuck them in Iraq and Afghanistan. We screwed that up a little bit because of this. But fundamentally, what I'm getting at right now is the U.S. military is going through another transformation. That transformation is to take a army that has fought counterterrorism operations, the GWOT, for 20 years. We have generals now that have never known anything but Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not going to help them at all in China. That's not going to allow us to have the right tactics, the right equipment, the right doctrine. So what we need is a group very similar to what happened in the early 80s when Reagan gave all this money to the military and said, okay, turn it into the best military in the world. If we'd used all that money to fight the last war, we would have just ticked it away. So my advice to Israel would be appropriately take a look at the after action reviews, but you need to stick a couple of guys in the ivory tower and say, okay, let's not stay focused on what happened in Gaza. Let's, as General Shafir said, focus on the potential threats that we are seeing in the future wars that we have to fight, and how do we get the capabilities to fight that? It's got to be a combination of assessing future threats and future capabilities.
Just as a reminder, General Kimmett, after the Yom Kippur War, the U.S. Army, along with the IDF, when their lessons learned were combined, and you had your Field Manual 100 under Generals Depew and others at Tradoc, the motto was win the first battle. And Israel, on October the 7th, lost the first battle, unfortunately, and it all went downhill, at least for a while from there.
Well, what I'd say, that's a very interesting point because I talk about that in the article. Too many of our NATO allies took the Yom Kippur War and thought that's how the future wars were going to be fought, winning it at the front line with direct fire weapons and aircraft to support that frontline battle. What we did is we went from that active defense that we had in Europe to air-land battle, which said the battle isn't supposed to be against, the best battle is not one fought at the front lines, but deep battle. And we developed the capability to fight that deep battle with and develop the weapons like ATACMS, long-range fighters, so on and so forth. So I would say it was visionary that some guys like Don Starry down at Tradoc said, no, Yom Kippur War is important, but that's not how we're going to beat the Russians.
So very, very interesting discussion. We will have lots of others like it, hopefully. For the time being, thank you, General Kimmett, General Shafir, and General Gavish. This has been an update, Israel at War, from TV7 News in Jerusalem. For the time being, shalom, and have a great weekend.